Is Macklin Celebrini worth all the pain we as Sharks fans have gone through this season? Will Scouch joins to help profile the projected number one overall pick.
You're Locked On Sharks, your daily podcast on the San Jose Sharks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to Locked On Sharks, the premier hockey podcast covering your favorite team in the Bay Area. My name is JD Young, contributor at San Jose Hockey Now, and I want to thank you for making Locked On Sharks your first listen. Proudly part of the Locked On Network, we cover your team every day. And if you want to be an everydayer, all you have to do is just follow wherever you get podcasts, or you can subscribe on YouTube as well. And today we are talking about the belle of the ball, the big one, Macklin Celebrini, the projected number one overall pick in the 2024 NHL Draft. And we're going to be talking about if it's worth it. What we've gone through is going to be worth it. Where Macklin Celebrini would kind of slide in. If he's going to make the jump to the NHL, we'll talk about comparing him to some of the guys from the 2023 draft class. So without further ado, we bring in our good friend, Will Scouch. And now we bring in the GOAT, Will Scouch. Will, how's it going, buddy?
You said that, not me. I don't feel like a goat. I don't feel like a goat.
I will show the Venmo payment that said, please announce me as the GOAT for all to see. Even though you Canadians don't even have Venmo, you found a way because you are the GOAT.
No, there was none of this. Just for posterity, there's none of that going on here.
Okay. Wink, wink. So we're going to be talking about a little player known as Macklin Celebrini on today's episode. If you don't know who Macklin Celebrini is, welcome to 2024. He is a forward with Boston University in the NCAA, 6 foot, 190 pounds, in 37 games this year, has 32 goals, 32 assists, 174 shots on goal, a finalist for the Hobey Baker. His mantle is already full of awards. So I ask you, Will Scouch, what makes Macklin Celebrini such an intriguing prospect?
Well, I mean, there's really not much that doesn't make him a really intriguing prospect. He's just such a good player.
Thanks for joining Locked On Sharks.
Yeah, that's it. We got there. We did it. We made it. Yeah. No, I mean, he's a very, very well-rounded and projectable player. There's a lot to like. We'll start with like the area that I don't think you're going to get with him, which is like a super physical 200-foot, crush everyone center. But that's because he doesn't really need to do that. Like, he's a very clever and tactical and surgical defensive player. He monitors rushes really well. In my work, he has really good rates of breaking up cycles and getting play going. Really, really good forechecker as well. Just reads routes and reads opponents really well. Closes gaps really effectively. Like, again, he's one of these guys who has a really good sense for the flow of the game. He often doesn't really jump out at you off the puck, but then next thing you know, he's stripped the puck off of someone and he's going the other way. Obviously, a lot of people talk about his shot. He's got 32 goals in 37 games this year. Like, you don't do that without being a great shooter. Catch and release, one-timers, But the thing that I really like about Celebrini is that he produces his production in a variety of ways, right? Like, it's not just that he's a power play specialist or a perimeter playmaking kind of guy. Like, he gets into the dirty areas if he can. He battles below the goal line and really tries to sort of keep play going. He's got a pretty good amount of skill to sort of get around players and evade pressure and all those fun things. Like, so there's not really a whole lot I can look at with Celebrini where I want more out of him. He just goes out, and I think he's also gotten better and better over the course of the season. Just every game I've seen him, I just kind of go, okay, yeah, you're settling into this style, this level of play a little bit better. Not that there was a ton of work to really do, but he's just one of these guys who just goes out and plays a really, really effective and admirable game where he can set up plays, he can take his own scoring chances. And he's no slouch off the puck either, right? Like he plays that really tactical defensive style, and it works for him. So, there's a lot of good things to mention, and not a whole lot to really pick apart that I think is worth being super concerned about.
So, I think one thing we have to also remember and remind people, he's 17. Like he doesn't turn 18 until middle of June. Like, and he's doing this in college, which is, one of the more physical, it's much more structured, much more physical. And, you mentioned he's not like the most physical guy, but like, granted, I'm just an idiot who watches games or what, but like for a 17-year-old, like you see, he is not afraid to get in there and mix it up. Like his size is 6'190". I mean, it's not the biggest guy in the world, but he's stout, and I think he's really strong for his age too. And again, especially playing against guys who are definitely old. Everybody plays against is older than him. So I ask you, Will, is it worth it? Is it the pain and suffering we as Sharks fans who we're putting ourselves in the best position to hopefully draft Macklin Celebrini, combine him with Will Smith? Is it worth it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like he's a really good hockey player. Like
is he a number one pick like in most drafts? Is this like or is it just because this draft class is seen as slightly weaker at the top?
I don't know if he would be my number 1, 2, or 3 or 4 last year. Like Leo Carlsson, I think brings a different kind of flavor of really projectable NHL game. And I think he's had a great rookie year. I think Celebrini does have a little bit more flash in his game there. I think that those two could be compared. Celebrini, though, I mean, there's been a lot of pain, right? And I feel like also, the thing to keep in mind, and the thing I always tell despondent fan bases is it's not just about winning the first overall pick, right? Like winning the first overall pick and picking a guy first overall, it's not going to fix all your problems. Look at the Chicago Blackhawks, right? They're still in the basement with Connor Bedard in the lineup most games. So there's got to be more to the picture to get yourselves out of the basement. But Celebrini is an excellent piece to build around. You put him with some guys who can score. You've got multiple scoring threats there with him on the board there, and he can make plays. You've got a guy who I think projects as an NHL center. But the other thing too is like some people are saying that this draft class is a little weaker than normal, but I think that San Jose is going to finish with the worst lottery odds, I would think, at this point. Even if you lose the lottery and you end up 3rd overall, you're going to have a choice of some really good players there too you can work with, right? I mean, obviously they're not Macklin Celebrini, but if he is the first overall pick, it's certainly not one where you're going, man, if only this were year X and we would have player Y. So I think he'll be a really good, really well-rounded NHL player and certainly a great building block.
So, I mean, right, we know that, like, Macklin Celebrini, if the Sharks draft him, he's not going to come here and, like, next year, the Sharks are a playoff team. Like, this is still a long, slow, painful rebuild. But having a guy like Macklin Celebrini on your team makes your life a lot easier going forward. Like, that's just kind of one of those questions a guy who looks to project to be a number one center on your team. And now if you pair him with Will Smith, who, I know there's questions about if he's going to be a center or a wing, it just gives you some flexibility where, like, hey, Will Smith's not a center, or Will Smith's not number one center, he can be a number one winger, he could be a number two center. It helps your just stock that cabinet, which has been they've been filling it, but they still need those kind of top end players. So we mentioned the 2023 draft class, and of course I think that draft class is going to be one that we talk about for a while, which is kind of how special the top end talent is. I mean, you mentioned some of those other guys. Where do you say if Celebrini was in last year's draft, is he 3rd, 4th, 5th? Like, kind of where would you have pegged him?
As I said, for example, I had Smith at 6, Oliver Moore at 5, Leo Carlsson at 4, and I think he really gives Leo Carlsson a run for his money. Him and the three of them, Michkov, Carlsson, and Celebrini, I think are, you could have arguments about who is going where in there, and they all bring different things to the table for sure. I don't know. Adam Fantilli, I think, is a tough sell. That guy, I mean, if I could combine Fantilli with the Celebrini, you'd have a really, really spectacular player.
He'd be
But
good.
unfortunately, you can't because
Yeah.
Fantilli's shortcoming kind of was on the vision and IQ side of the game, and just sort of, maintaining control of the puck a little bit better. Whereas Celebrini is just, a really determined and intelligent, and it sounds bad, but his game is just very simple and very calculated and very effective, which is totally fine, and it really works. So for me, he'd be somewhere in that range, like a 3, 4, 5 in last year's class. But I think I would definitely take him ahead of an Oliver Moore and a Will Smith, but nestled in there somewhere as a Macklin Celebrini.
And again, this isn't like with guys this style, you have to pick nits, right? This isn't like you hate Oliver Moore, you hate Will Smith. Like you have to, when you're kind of having these potential franchise changing picks, you have to pick nits. And again, it's not like you hate Will Smith. You don't hate Oliver Moore. Like it's
certainly not.
Like the Sharks are, again, if everything works out, like the Sharks are going to feel really good about the kind of the course of their franchise over the past 24 months if they're able to kind of land the plane here. So, all right, guys, before we continue with Will Scouch and we talk about if Macklin Celebrini is ready to make the jump to the NHL, we talk about if bringing Celebrini and Smith together is a good idea. Just need to take a quick break. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and leveled up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. With eBay Guarantee Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guarantee Fit only available to U.S. customers. I think that brings to kind of the big question is, I know we normally talk about strengths and weaknesses. You kind of all mentioned that. In the timeline, right? Is he just like pencil him in? He's going to be in the NHL next year, or is there a real opportunity for him to go back and play college hockey again?
I think he could go either way. I don't think that he has much else to do and test himself on in college anymore. Yeah, he has been one of, if not the best college player in the country this year. And I would think that, again, like, especially if it is San Jose or something where the expectations are relatively limited, because the physicality, like, he's going to face some physical pressure in the NHL just by virtue of how he plays. And he's a guy who loves to sort of battle through it and sort of, work his way into the offensive zone in a multitude of ways. And he's going to need to learn how to do that in the NHL. And I think that there will be some level of an adjustment period, but I don't think he's going to do that very much in the NCAA because, what are you expecting out of him? To score 100 points next year? Probably not. It would be cool, but at San Jose, you can bring up some of the younger guys, see what you got with them. Your expectations are pretty limited. And if he hits right away and he has a great summer and, everything goes the way it should, then great. You've got a really good NHLer right away. And I get the feeling that they're just going to want to, you're just going to want to pick him up and put him in the lineup or put him in camp and just see what happens.
Yeah, and especially as, again, the Sharks for the first time in 1,000 years are going to have cap space. So if they happen to win Celebrini, right, and you don't have any major contracts you have to pay out, you have so many young guys or guys on ELCs where, like, if you want to kind of be a little bit more aggressive in free agency, try to get some veterans, almost like you saw last year with the Blackhawks. They tried to do, right? They tried to get, they got Taylor Hall. I know he got hurt like 3 games into the season or whatever. But you remember Taylor Hall is a Blackhawk. I know it's hard. It's been such a long time, but getting guys like that who can kind of elevate the floor of the franchise right now, I think is going to be the best route. And that's a conversation that to have as we go into the off season here. But again, I think most people agree he's probably going to the NHL next year. But what type of player, like what is your kind of, I know, comp or ceiling, or like what would you kind of put him as a type of player? Are you looking like a 80-90 type of point player in the NHL going forward? Like where are you kind of putting him at?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's reasonable. Like, he kind of really strikes me as, just as a general thought that, that always sticks out in my mind, just a sort of Jonathan Taves-esque guy, where just a really determined, smart, effective player who just kind of does a lot of things really, really well. He might be a bit more of a maybe, fun sniper than a Taves was. And maybe not as much as sort of like a physically intense guy like Taves kind of was, but in that alley, I think is somewhere in there. Just a very well-rounded, dual threat offensive guy who, I think could be a point a game guy, and it depends on who he's playing with. But yeah, I think that all the ingredients are there for a premier, top line NHL center.
Is this Eklund's friend that we've been searching for?
That's a great thought. He desperately needs a friend. I think it's dire.
Luke Cunning's not doing it for you, buddy.
No. Yeah, whenever I watch the Sharks, Luke Cunning's not the guy jumping off the screen. All due respect to Luke Cunning. He's played more NHL games than me. But yeah, I mean, Eklund is a bit more of that higher pace, board play guy. I think he's diversified his game a little bit, adapted to the NHL a lot better this year.
Yes.
And so, yeah, I think just bringing that sort of high speed approach would offset Celebrini. Not that Celebrini is slow by any means, but it's just not it's not his brand to really be that way every game. So yeah, I think that that's entirely possible.
Now, just kind of maybe a general more team building question here is, so say the Sharks do luck out, they get the first pick, they get Celebrini, right? What do you think about bringing Celebrini and Smith along at the same time? Both guys who are going to be kind of making that projection. Again, we know expectations for the Sharks are going to be not high next year, but like at some point, right, we have to start kind of seeing these guys in the NHL. Is that something that is maybe too risky, or like what do you do with Smith at that point?
Well, so I'll be honest, and I haven't seen enough of Smith this season to know if the gaps in his game that were there last year have really been patched. And from watching Boston College here and there this season, like, it just seems like those three guys are just continuing on the wagon they were on last year, Perreault and Leonard and Smith, and it's all out offense all the time. And Smith's, big sort of weakness was that the real sort of pace of his game was kind of low, and he really relied on having the puck a lot and using his skill and sort of moving the puck around kind of slowly to make lanes and everything. Like, that's going to be tricky, I think, in the NHL. And defensively, like, he was kind of a guy who wasn't really involved a whole lot, and I think that was raised as a concern at the time. And that's the big thing that sort of moved him down my list, even though he's one of the most creative and, fun to watch guys. So I would say that if I had done my homework more, I could give you a better answer, because that's kind of an important thing to seal up. Because if Will Smith is a guy who's not productive in the NHL, then, I don't think he's the type of player who's going to regress and end up a third line guy in the NHL. Like, you need him to be a producer and an offensive player.
Yes.
Celebrini, though, I mean, I think that he is at least ready to give it a go. Give it, especially on a team where the expectations are pretty limited. Just go out there, play some minutes. We'll find a spot for you. I think there's not really a whole lot of sense putting him back in college. And with Will Smith, it kind of is a more it depends situation. But I get the feeling that, again, if the expectations are kind of low, then maybe a Will Smith coming over now makes sense. But again, the flexibility, though, with Smith is that if things aren't quite where you want them to be, you can send them back, and next year you can pull them out, and then you have the luxury of potentially putting him in the AHL if he needs a bit of time there to sort of adjust and whatever. So that's another thing to consider. But I feel a lot more confident with Celebrini, and especially with his sort of 200-foot game.
All right, guys, before we continue with Will Scouch, we actually talk about his upcoming rankings. Ones he hasn't released yet. He gave me a sneak peek, so we'll talk about some of the guys among the top kind of 10 to 15 here. Just need to take a quick break. Did you know that even with a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. The offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024. Validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of the first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. 3% match on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker dealer. Makes sense. So let's talk about your soon-to-be released rankings here. Boy. So again, you're they're your rankings. So.
I know. It's always fun. That's all.
Yeah. So you do them in tiers, right? Of course. Yeah. So you have a tier of kind of your first tier was Celebrini, Demidov, Catton, and Lindstrom here. So interesting, especially because we hear kind of with the defenseman how if you want a defenseman, this kind of feels like the cost, but none of them kind of crack your top tier. Is this just because they're all the defensemen kind of, as we talked about before, they'll just have that question mark of like, I could see you being this, but I could also see you being this. Is that it?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, for posterity, the next 4 names on the list are all defensemen. So, so that's just throwing that out there as people are writing the comments about how much I hate Artyom Levshinov.
Why do you hate
calm down? It's like, calm down, he's not that far off, But no, I mean, it's just because honestly, like, I really value players in the draft who present a lot of things that you always could want more of in the NHL, right? And with guys, Celebrini, he just gets it. He goes out and just plays hockey really, really well in a way that you can see working in the NHL. There's nothing
that's the title of the podcast. He just gets it. He plays hockey well.
Yeah. And Demidov, like, sometimes you'll want to pull your hair out with him, but every time that happens, he makes 5 plays where you go, nobody can make plays like that. And I, he's just got the skill level and the creativity, and I think he's gotten a lot better this year with his vision and timing and everything, and not overpossessing the puck. That I think that the potential for him is also limitless. Like, he may be a winger, he's not a center. He might, but I feel like he'll be a very productive NHL player if all goes well. Catton, for me, I value guys who, like, I call them sort of Band-Aid players. Like, they stitch things together, right? He takes breakout passes extremely well. He quarterbacks rushes extremely well. He gets in the offensive zone extremely effectively. And he's just a remarkable playmaker in a sort of high-level way, right? It's not just he can time passes through feet really well. He can do that, but it's like, he thinks he's got a defenseman close to him. He'll stop on a dime, let that defenseman step for a couple of feet, and he'll make a pass that he's sort of seeing in his peripheral or something. Like, just that sort of next level thinking that I think puts him, really high on the list for this year. And Lindstrom, I think Lindstrom's a soft one, I think, in that range, just because the potential is huge with him. I mean, he is huge. That's it.
Yes.
But, he's got a lot of really great tools, that you don't really find that often. Being 6'5" or whatever it is, and having really, really smooth hands, really, strong footwork, powerful stride, really physical player. He can play center. There's just not that many of those guys that really come around a whole lot that can play at a pace that I think the NHL kind of requires. And I mean, the rest of the picture, I mean, that's really just it. There are a lot of question marks I have with players that are ranked shortly after those guys. And there are question marks with these guys too, in a sense, but it's just like, for example, the Chicago Blackhawks, right? Like, would you like to have an Ivan Demidov setting up Connor Bedard for the next 10, 15 years? Like, sure. Yeah. Okay. Or
Yeah,
the other
that
way
sounds
around,
great.
right? Like, that sounds
Yeah.
pretty good to me, right? And so it's like, even if you don't get the top pick, you're going to end up with really, really good players. And I think that something that has become apparent in recent years is that the NHL draft is a lot more even than I think it used to be. Like, there's just always a lot of really good players. And at the same time, the NHL is also a lot more difficult. It's a lot more, it's a lot faster, more skilled, more everything. And these guys can take time to, get to where they could be. And I think that's going to be true with all of these players. But I think if they do work, they'll bring some really, really important things that are hard to find in the NHL to the forefront and do a really good job at it.
All right. And your next tier, which has probably about a dozen names or so here.
Right.
But the guy on the top of your next tier, Alphonse Friege, who might be the first time I've said his name on this podcast. The floor is yours, sir. You have him over, so you have him over. You have him as your number one ranked defenseman, right? And we know, kind of going into this draft, like there's a lot of Sam Dickinson. Like you talk about, like we've kind of talked through the names who could be there, like 2, 3, 4, 5 if the Sharks. But Alphonse Friege, I'm hoping I said it right. He's from Sweden. The floor is yours, sir. Give me your elevator pitch on why he is your number one ranked defenseman.
So I'll start by saying that from 5 to 18 or whatever it is at the end of this group is extremely close. Like, honestly, you could just mash these numbers up. Different teams are going to prioritize different things, and this is why I do things in tiers. But with Frey, honestly, it's just it's a process of elimination. I watch him and I love him. I watch the other defensemen in the draft and I just think that there's more question marks with them. So I bump them down. And I go back to Frey and I watch more. I watch him internationally and I go, yeah, I think this kid has all the tools to be a great offensive defenseman in the NHL. Like, in the modern sense of an offensive defenseman. I know a lot of people are talking about Zane Parekh, and I absolutely see a lot of offensive potential with him, but I just think that in terms of how offensive defensemen in the NHL these days are successful and create production, you require tools that I think Frey has, where he's a wonderful skater, really mobile in every direction, and he combines, like, he could be going full tilt and the puck control is right there. It's perfect. And so for a guy like that who, he's not the biggest guy in the world, and like he'll lose some board battles here and there, but Artyom Levchinov loses board battles, right? Like Anton Salayev is
really quick. He's 6'1", 190. It's not like he's some tiny dude. He's not it's not like Luca Cagnoni who's 5'9". Like he's 6 foot.
He goes
like yes.
And so to me, it's like when I look at NHL defensemen who are offensive leaning and point producing, it's and especially when I look back in the draft, in previous drafts, of the guys who are real high point producers on defense and work versus the real high point producers that don't. And the guys that seem to work are the ones that are extremely skilled, really creative, and are constantly moving their feet all over the ice. And it's, even if they have that defensive shortcoming because they might not be the biggest or strongest, they end up using that skating to really apply themselves defensively really well. Quinn Hughes is a great example of that for me. So for me with him, it's like other guys, I just have question marks. I still have questions about him, but I still look at the positives with him and I go, yeah, I would love to draft this guy, sink my teeth into him, leave him in Sweden for a few years, stretch your legs on the big ice, young fella, have some fun. And just keep pushing that sort of offensive game that he's got and trusting himself, because every time he seems to do so, it works for him. He has 14 goals this year, and a lot of it, it's not just point shots. He's a guy who will spot seams, spot holes, step up in the offensive zone, and really sort of try to chip in offensively. So I just love him. And the rest of the picture, it's just a lot more murky, but I think there are some players where there's a bit of certainty that, if you wanted, say, a Michael Brentzik Newgard or a TJ Ginla or a Cole Eiserman or something, you could certainly convince me, right? You may be able to get Alphonse Frey with your 5th overall pick in the 2nd round, for all I know. So cool, whatever.
It's who has 2 early 2nd round picks.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. So, it's not like I'm tethered to this, but he's a guy where I'm going, am I sure I want to have him this high? I go back and watch him and I go, I think there's a ton of potential with this guy, with the right guidance and development and whatever. And I think he could be a great offensive defenseman based on how he plays in the NHL.
All right, really quickly, before we get you out of here. So the Sharks, it's trending toward, as we're recording this on April 2nd, it's trending towards them kind of getting that Penguins pick, which will probably be like 11, 12, 13. Say the Sharks do get Celebrini at number 1. Who is the guy you're kind of targeting for that pick? Is it a guy like Steve Bulliam? Is it Adam Juracek?
Yeah.
Like, who is maybe you're kind of targeting for that pick right there at 12?
Well, I mean, if I'm putting on my Mike Greer hat,
yes.
If a guy
looks very nice on you.
Yeah, great. Yeah, great. I mean, I am wearing the closest thing to teal I think I own. So, not so bad. I think there's going to be a variety of directions they could go.
Yes.
Let's say it's Celebrini that comes off the top. I think that gives you a bit of leeway to sort of maybe take a risk. I'm still a believer in Adam Juracek. I think that guy, he had a really rough time in the Czech Pro League this year. Definitely a little overmatched. But the mobility and the skating and the dependability of that mobility that he's got every shift is just really hard to ignore. I thought he played great at the World Juniors before he got hurt, which is really unfortunate. But I think there's going to be a number of directions you could go. I mean, if you've got a Macklin Celebrini, do you go for a TJ Ginla? Go for that hardworking, determined guy who has a nice sort of well-rounded offensive skill set and works his tail off every shift. Michael Brandsegg-Nygård strikes me as a guy that Mike Greer might look at, just a really projectable, well-rounded physical guy. And him and Macklin Celebrini, I think, would be really good gets in the top 15 of the draft, where, Brandsegg-Nygård might not be a massive point producer in the NHL, but I do think he'll be a very, very useful guy who can kill penalties. He can stand in front of the net on the power play. He can make a simple play below the goal line and get pucks into scoring areas. But, he's no slouch. He's not like some slow, plodding, big physical
that's
guy.
a third line plug.
Skill.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
He's got the skill and the pace in his game to really make an impact. And I've really liked watching him, and I think he's gotten a lot better over the year too. So again, there's a few others I could talk about, but there's going to be some really good options for San Jose to complement a guy like Celebrini with, and especially with all that skill that they've drafted over the last few years. They went for a little bit more. They went a little bit more on the beefy side last year. But that's fine. You do need to balance out some of that skill, and I guess we'll see how that works out. But if that's kind of the trend they want to follow, I think there's going to be some good options left over after 10th overall for sure.
All right. So who's the guy? Last time I asked you who you thought was going to be the best player, non-Celebrini. I believe you said Demidov. Who is a guy that's kind of looked at as a top 10, maybe not consensus, but is looked at as a potential top 10 guy that you're kind of a little like, I don't see it.
Yeah. I mean, okay. So,
again, why do you hate this player?
Yeah. So for me, that guy, I think pretty easily is Consta Helenius. Okay. That's a guy who could be a top 10 player, maybe.
Top 15,
Yeah, top 15. And he's more in the, I think, early to mid 20s for me. I look at him and I see a guy who I think is a step ahead of his competition in Finland. Like, he forechecks well, kind of similar to Celebrini in that sense. Like, he times things well. He's not the fastest guy in the world. He's a physical player for sure. He's a little small, but he's physical. He's no slouch. He doesn't shy away from contact, but he is a little bit slight. He gets, erased off the puck a little bit easily. Coming off the boards, the skill level and quickness isn't quite enough to really make a huge difference a lot of the time. But he is a really smart player. Like, if you like guys who lead with smarts, he's not a bad option. But I thought that the World Juniors exposed a lot of sort of the questions that I have about him, where faster, more physical competition kind of made him a little bit less of a factor. And I just, in the NHL, like, what's he going to be? Because I don't really know. He could be a good sort of a smart per puck touch player that can shoot as well. Like, he's a decent shooter. But he can, make that one touch pass in the offensive zone to an open man and identify those options quickly and score points that way. So maybe there's something there. But again, like in the draft for me, I'm looking for players who I can tell they do at least a thing extremely well. And I want to find players that do as many things extremely well that I can find. And so he just kind of, again, it's not that I dislike guys like this, guys like, all these other players, right? Zane Parekh is another one. It's like, I don't dislike these players. It's just that I think other players bring more to the table that is more applicable to NHL hockey that just bumps these guys down a little bit, right? Like, not even that much relative to most people, like just a smidge, 10 slots or so, sure. And so for me, it's just that there's I think question marks about him. But I'm sure I could be wrong. Who knows? If he's the smartest player in the NHL, maybe he doesn't need to be super resilient or fast or skilled or whatever, right? Like, it could work for him. Who knows?
All right, and last question, probably the easiest softball question you're gonna get. Where in the draft does Macklin Celebrini go?
Well, I heard that he still makes Duplo sets rather than Lego. He's really into Playmobil, so he might be a little bit immature. So I think he should fall all the way to wherever your favorite, not you, you as in the world, your favorite team is, because maybe, I don't know, he might not deserve to go first overall after all, after the Duplo scandal breaks.
The Duplo scandal. I like how, the GM and coach who both go to Boston University alumni, not drafting the Boston University kid.
Could you imagine? In Vegas, like, not even that far from San Jose, like in Vegas, I'm sure there's going to be tons of Shark fans, and they come out there and go, Artyom Levshinov, and
give us and his dad, who literally works for the Golden State Warriors, a former junior Shark. It would be, I think I would just walk from Vegas to the ocean, and you would never see me.
It would be so asinine that you would have to think that San Jose knew something everyone else didn't. Right? He
basically was like, I don't want to go there or something like that.
It's like I'm tired.
Like an Eric Lindros. Yeah, like an Eric Lindros scenario where he's just like, I'm not going. So
I'd rather go to Winnipeg or something.
That way I'll catch 7 different airports to get to Winnipeg. All right, Will, thank you so much for your time. Where can the people find you, buddy?
Yeah, you can find me at scouching.ca. Subscription there gets you access to some exclusive written work, early access to stuff like my rankings and all kinds of things like that. Tons of data tools are hosted there as well that you can check out. You can also help me out at Puck Preps, where I've been covering the 16U Nationals for the USA Hockey Tournament that's going on starting on the 2nd, which is today. So doing a lot of game reports for them, doing some coverage of the 06s, and now a little bit more with the 08s and 07s. So that's been interesting and a lot of fun. I also run a consulting business, Fractal Hockey Consulting, where if you're an organization and you have needs on the business side or on the hockey ops side, we have some sort of solution that will help. So you can reach out to us at fractalhockey.com there. And I think I ran the gamut there. Those are the big ones. So yeah, scouching.ca, Puck Preps, and Fractal Hockey.
And of course, you do 2 live shows like a week, so make sure you guys go check out
that too. Yeah, Mondays at 8 Eastern and Thursdays at 2 in the afternoon. I should remember the things that I do with my life. I really should.
You should. I barely remember what I had for lunch today, buddy. So it gets worse as you get older. Of course, you can find Locked On Sharks wherever you get podcasts. Watch on YouTube as well if you want to see Will Scouch's glorious mustache. Mine is shaking in fear as I've seen it. So I'm sure we will talk again soon, buddy. And hopefully see you at the draft this year.
I'm there. Yeah, I'm going.
Yes. Yeah. So again, if not, you might have to come pick me up if I'm walking from Vegas to the ocean. You might have to come save me. So
I'll come get you on my bird scooter or whatever it was that I was renting that night.
That would be sweet. Just you and I running around Vegas on a bird scooter. So hopefully we'll make that happen.
Great content. Yeah,
that would be great. That is why I am the content boy. So thanks, buddy.
All right. Yeah, no problem.